Welcome to the Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records presentation on a general introduction to agency records management for Arizona state and local agencies. Brought to you by the Records Management Branch and presented by me, Aeneas Santiago, the Records Management Specialist in our small unit. The Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records is a sub-function of the Secretary of State. What I hope to cover today will be used by those responsible for records management within their state or local agency as defined on the right, or those parties in interacting with the records management for an agency. We're going to start from the very beginning, what a record is, its types, potential sensitivity, and life cycle, and then explain a bit more of the variables such as the stakeholders in records, evolution of the field and general practice, the issues that came with it, and the ultimate solution to all that, which is a records and information management or RIM program, also sometimes referred to as just simply a records management program. We're going to outline all that information for you, relate it back to the nature of a record, and even give you a blueprint of an effective RIM program for usage. We'll explain a bit about us in the process and what we provide, and if needed, other resources or recommendations for assistance. Before we jump into records management as a concept or practice, I want to take a step back and make sure we're all grounded in the same understanding. Because before we can manage records, we need to be clear on what it is we're actually managing. So the first question to ask is simple but important. What is a record? Arizona law defines this for us in Arizona Revised Statutes 41-151, but in plain language, a record is any recorded information that a government agency creates or receives while conducting official business and keeps or should keep because it documents how government operates or because it has informational or historical value. That definition is intentionally broad. It includes confidential records and it applies regardless of format. Paper, emails, databases, audio files, videos, photographs, if it documents official business, it counts. In other words, records are the official memory of government. They show what decisions were made, how they were made, and why. Just as important as knowing what is a record is knowing what is not. Non-records are the extra materials created along the way that don't actually document official action or decision-making. Think of these as the leftovers of the process. This includes things like drafts that don't influence the final outcome, convenience copies, informal notes or emails, blank forms, working papers with no lasting value, extra exhibits or artifacts that don't document anything, publications that require no actions and aren't part of your agency's work. But one of the most important rules in records management is this: never mix records and non-records. When those get combined, it becomes difficult to tell what actually matters, what needs to be retained and what can be disposed of. That confusion creates risk, legal, operational, and administrative. If you're unsure whether something is a record, don't guess. The National Archives released a simple flowchart in 2021 that walks through this decision logically. You can pause the presentation here to see that information on the right. If it's still unclear after that, though, this is exactly the kind of question we at Records Management are here to help you answer. Once we understand what a record is, the next step is understanding what kind of record it is. Every record can be evaluated using three core considerations, which are permanence, format, and function. These three factors guide nearly every decision you'll make later: how long to keep it, how to store it, how to protect it, and what happens to it in the end. First is permanence, which you can think of as tiers of long-term value. At the top are permanent records. These have enduring legal, historical, or research value beyond their original purpose. These are the records people will actively seek out decades from now. Landmark court cases, foundational policy decisions, rights of way, or documentation of significant events, for example. Below that, though, are non-permanent records. These support operations for a defined period but lose their usefulness over time. They may be referenced for statistics or verification, but eventually they no longer serve an ongoing purpose. At the bottom are transitory records. These have only immediate short-term value, things like reminders, routing slips, or reference copies, but once their purpose is served, they can be immediately discarded. Understanding permanence helps prevent two common mistakes: keeping too much for too long or getting rid of something too soon. The second consideration is format. Records can be born digital, digitized, or non-digital. Born digital records are created and maintained electronically. Digitized records start as some kind of physical format, but are scanned with the intention of relying on the digital version from then on. Non-digital records remain physical. Why does this matter? Because only the official record needs to be retained. If you scan a document specifically so the electronic version replaces the paper, the digital version becomes the official record, and the physical can usually be discarded as that becomes a copy. But if a record was created digitally, that digital version is the official record. Printing it doesn't change that. Format determines what must be kept, what can be discarded, and what medium matters. The third consideration is function, what role the record plays. Records may be administrative, executive, personnel-related, legal, fiscal, or programmatic. But function helps distinguish core records from supporting materials and ensures that records are categorized appropriately. It also helps determine retention periods and access controls. An important point to make before any others after this is that not all records are meant for public access. Some records contain information that is confidential or sensitive, such as medical data, personal identifiers, biometric information, legal matters, financial details, employment records, or proprietary business information. Banking information, medical histories, your performance at work, and fingerprints are all examples of that. A helpful way to think about this is to personalize the question. Would I want this information publicly accessible if it were about me? Protecting sensitive information is one of the most critical legal responsibilities in records management. Sure, transparency is important, but so is protection. For this, review internal policies and consult legal counsel to ensure the best course of action. Agencies should have their own trainings built in for that guidance for this topic. Every record follows a life cycle with three major phases: creation, inventory and retention, and disposition. Understanding this life cycle allows you to manage records proactively instead of reacting later. During creation, information is received or generated, entered into a system, assigned ownership, classified, organized, and reviewed for accuracy and completeness. This is the stage where many problems and future headaches can be avoided by doing things correctly up front. Clear ownership, consistent organization, and accuracy are all matters here. Once finalized and editing stops, records move into inventory and retention. They're logged into an inventory so staff know what exists and where it lives. They're organized consistently, and most importantly, a retention period is assigned using either the general schedule or an approved custom schedule which we publish detailing the kind of record, how long to keep it, and what to do with the record after that. Let's circle back to an inventory for a minute. This is a list of records kept by outlining the following: type, location, digital or physical format, volume, condition, function and purpose, active versus inactive status, and date range. An inventory overall answers two questions: what records do I have and where? Retention consecutively answers two questions: how long do we keep this and what happens when that time is up? When retention is met and there are no legal holds, the record reaches disposition. Non-permanent and transitory records are destroyed securely through some determined medium. Permanent records are transferred to the state archives for long-term preservation. Destruction and transfer are both formal actions and require proper authorization and documentation. Although records may feel like static objects, they are actually touched by many different people throughout their life cycle, who collectively host a shared effort across an entire organization and beyond. Internally, the most visible participants are staff, the records officer, and executive management. Staff are the day-to-day creators and users of records. Their habits, how they name files, where they store information, and whether they follow established procedures have the greatest impact on how effective a records program is. The records officer serves as the central coordinator and subject matter lead. This person ensures records are being managed in accordance with law and policy, acts as a point of contact, and works with us on approvals, schedules, and guidance. Executive management provides authority and direction. Without leadership support, records programs struggle, but with it, records management becomes part of normal operations rather than an afterthought. Supporting this internal structure are IT and legal counsel. IT ensures systems are secure, functional, and capable of managing records properly. Legal counsel ensures compliance with statutes, litigation holds, confidentiality requirements, and risk management. Externally, records are influenced by oversight entities, the public and us. Oversight may come from auditors, regulatory agencies, or higher levels of government. The public interacts with records through requests, applications, and legal proceedings, and we provide structure, guidance, approval, and support throughout the process. The concept of records management has never been static either. It has always evolved in response to two pressures: volume and technology. As agencies grew and populations expanded, the amount of information being created increased dramatically. Early systems relied on paper files, ledgers, and physical storage. That worked until it didn't. The introduction of digital technology into agencies around 1965 has fundamentally changed record keeping. Storage became easier, retrieval faster, and duplication effortless. This was characterized by microfilm, magnetic tape or diskette storage, and a focus on chronology, or when a record was filed rather than what the record is. But with that came new challenges: uncontrolled growth, unclear ownership, and inconsistent practice. Today, even small agencies generate more records in a year than entire departments did decades ago. This reality forces us to continuously re-evaluate how records are created, stored, protected, and disposed of. Evolution is not a sign of failure of old systems which worked at the time. It is a sign that records management is responding appropriately to change. Unfortunately, even the systems that we have in place or will be implementing now may change decades from now, but it is our duty to ensure that the change is sound. The most modern records management faces several persistent challenges and debates. Volume is one of the most obvious. Records accumulate quickly, especially in digital environments where storage feels unlimited and growth is nearly inconceivable. Security is another major concern. Records must be protected from unauthorized access, breaches, loss, or accidental disclosure. Legal constraints require agencies to balance transparency with confidentiality, access with protection, and retention with timely disposition. Longevity and accessibility pose technical questions. Will records remain readable, usable, and trustworthy over time? And finally, resistance to change is very real. New systems and procedures can feel disruptive to those who are comfortable with the process they've consistently utilized, even when those changes are improvements. These challenges are not unique to your agency, and although pressing questions, they certainly are not unsolvable either. The response to these challenges, a Records and Information Management or RIM program. RIM expands traditional records management by recognizing that information exists in many forms and systems, not just file cabinets or shared drives. It brings records, data, and governance together under one coordinated framework. A RIM program integrates compliance, lifecycle management, security, and access. It ensures information is managed intentionally rather than reactively. Many agencies are already doing parts of this work. RIM simply brings structure, consistency, and clarity to those efforts. That is to say, putting the existing efforts of agencies together into a concise system. Trust me, you won't want to deal with conjuring a whole records program alone, which is where we come in to give you guidance and assistance. But who are we necessarily? Records management is a branch of the Library, Archives, and Public Records, or LAPR, or LAPR. We were established in 1972 to 74 specifically to help agencies meet their statutory responsibilities with records management, especially in ARS 41-151 and ARS 39, while also improving how records are created, maintained, and ultimately disposed of. Our role isn't necessarily to be regulatory or tell you what to do, it's to be supportive. While statutes give us authority over retention schedules, disposition approvals, and records policy, our day-to-day work focuses on guidance, education, and problem solving. We work with agencies to interpret retention requirements, answer questions about formats and storage, assist with program development, and help navigate difficult or unclear situations. We also coordinate closely with the state archives. When records are identified as permanent, we stand by to ensure the state archives gets all the information they need to preserve and obtain that record for historical purposes. But for non-permanent records, we provide guidance that allows agencies to dispose of them confidently and lawfully. At the end of the day, our goal is simple: to help agencies manage records in a way that is streamlined, safeguarded, and sustainable without adding unnecessary burdens. But with all that said and done, we deeply insist you look at our resources and educational materials before tackling the task of a RIM program or utilize us for help. A strong RIM program does not happen by accident or sheer fate. It is a labor construct built on 5 interdependent foundations, and each one reinforces the others. The first foundation is authority and staffing. A RIM program must have legal backing and clearly defined responsibility. Although that responsibility rests with a dedicated records officer, daily routine may be shared among staff. Regardless, someone must be accountable for oversight and coordination and designated with us as a records officer. The second foundation is lifecycle management. Records must be managed intentionally from the moment they are created through their final disposition. This ensures consistency, reduces risk, and prevents records from lingering longer than necessary. This is based on a digital first, physical second mindset. Third is standards and documentation. Internal procedures, file plans, inventories, and written guidance, all the same, allow staff to follow the same process across the organization. Without standards, even well-intentioned staff will manage records differently. The fourth foundation is training and education. Staff need to understand not only what the rules are, but why they exist. Training reduces errors, prevents loss, and ensures continuity when roles change. This first needs to be broken down into basics and then built up into more complex understanding. Finally, support and guidance extend the program beyond internal operations. This includes coordination with oversight bodies, regulated entities, and partner agencies, as well as drawing on best practices from the broader records management community, especially through professional organizations, parallel agencies, and us. Building on those foundations are the core components that make a RIM program workable on a day-to-day basis. One of the most important is a uniform process. Staff should not have to guess how to manage records or create their own systems. A consistent approach saves time, reduces confusion, and improves compliance. If that system works across multiple programs, perfect. Another key component is ongoing improvement and monitoring. Records management is not a one-time project. It is not an end-all be-all or one person's brainchild at one time. As laws change, technology evolves, and agencies' needs shift, processes should be reviewed and adjusted accordingly, and at the very least, annually. Quality and sustainability are also critical. A good system is one that can be explained easily, maintained over time, and handed off to new staff without falling apart. Overly complex systems tend to fail when key individuals leave. Finally, engagement of the parties mentioned before ensures the program meets real needs. Understanding how staff, leadership, legal counsel, IT, oversight entities, and the public interact with your records allows the program to remain practical and relevant to the records themselves and those undertaking them. The foundations and components are important, but how you apply them may look different depending on your agency, and that's okay. There is no single perfect model. If your RIM program uses a different approach but achieves the same outcomes, it is all the better. What matters, though, are the results. Those outcomes include legal and regulatory compliance, which leads to successful audits and consistent reporting. Transparency and access, so public records requests are handled efficiently and without unnecessary friction. And operational efficiency, including cost savings and better use of storage technology and staff time. Equally important are longevity and integrity, a system that is compliant, streamlined, and durable, while also ensuring the preservation of records with lasting significance. Some of these benefits may be intentional, but others may come as a byproduct. Either way, the value of a well-implemented RIM program is undeniable. Let's bring this back to records themselves, the starting point of this entire conversation. A RIM program allows us to, as I said, intentionally guide a record through every stage of its life cycle, from creation to final disposition. Along the way, it incorporates input from the appropriate parties to ensure the record is complete, accurate, usable, and trustworthy. It respects the nature of the record, its format, function, significance, and the type of information it contains, while balancing the goals of security, accessibility, integrity, flexibility, and adaptability. Put simply, a RIM program addresses the fundamentals of record keeping by establishing a process that is simple, flexible, and sound. That balance ensures the program doesn't become over-engineered, losing sight of the record itself, or under-engineered, leaving gaps that create risk or inefficiency. With the bigger picture now in place, the legal foundation, the guiding principles, and the goals of a RIM program, we can shift from theory to practice. This slide is where everything comes together, your most important resource. What you're looking at here is the blueprint for Records and Information Management, or RIM, a clear, repeatable path that takes a record from the moment it is created to its final disposition with intent. This is Records Management 101, and it can be scaled, adjusted, and tailored to fit agencies of any size. It all begins with creation. The moment a record is created, the first and most important step is to identify the official record. Originals must be distinguished from copies, and those two should never be stored together. At this stage, the record should be as complete and accurate as possible because once it is finalized, no further changes should be made. Any convenience copies or transitory materials in the process should be disposed of immediately to prevent confusion down the line. Once the record is identified, the next step is organization and categorization. Records should be grouped with similar records by type, function, program, or business area, using a consistent structure. This is where file plans, naming conventions, or finding aids come into play. The goal, though, is very simple. Every record should live where someone else would expect to find it, not where only one person or a clique remembers it. After that comes retention. Each record must be matched to the appropriate series in either the general schedule or your agency's approved custom retention schedule published by us. That schedule determines how long the record must be kept and what happens to it at the end of that period. Retention schedules are living tools and should be reviewed regularly to reflect changes in law, regulation, business needs, or record use. We are tasked with updating the general schedule in tandem. With retention assigned, the focus shifts to access and retrieval. Records must be accessible to authorized users, auditors, regulators, and, when applicable, the public. Organization should support quick and reliable retrieval, not just storage for storage's sake. Before considering any advanced storage solutions, though, the priority should always be ease of access and clarity of control. At the same time, security and confidentiality must be built into the system. Sensitive records should be protected from unauthorized access, accidental disclosure, loss, or damage. This can range from simple physical safeguards like locked cabinets to more advanced digital controls such as encryption, backups, and system permissions. Access should be limited to those who truly need it. Fewer hands means fewer risks. Next is maintenance. Records are not static. Physical records need to be kept in safe, stable environments, and electronic records require ongoing monitoring to prevent corruption, loss, or version confusion. For digital records, version control is especially important as retention is often tied to the final modification date of the record. Once a record has met its retention period, and provided there are no legal holds, audits, or investigations, it moves into disposition. Non-permanent records are securely destroyed using approved methods and documented through proper authorization with this. Permanent records follow a different path and are transferred to the state archives for long-term preservation and access. The final step, and one of the most important, is training and reassessment. A RIM program is never set and forgotten. This is the point where you look back at the entire process and ask what worked, what didn't, and what could be improved. Laws change, technology evolves, staff roles shift. Procedures and trainings should be updated accordingly to that to keep the program effective and compliant. Taken together, This blueprint provides a process that is structured but flexible, detailed but practical. It keeps the focus where it belongs, on the record itself, while giving agencies the tools they need to manage information confidently, consistently, and lawfully. Putting all of this together may feel straightforward or it may even feel challenging, but most often it's both. Records management requires balancing efficiency, bureaucracy, and resistance to change. And when it feels overwhelming, it's important to remember you are not alone in this process. First and foremost, there's us. We exist specifically to support you with education, resources, guidance, and practical recommendations based on what we've seen work well across agencies. The law provides us as your resource, and we take that responsibility very seriously. There are also professional organizations and associations out there, whether by field, function, or level of government, that offer shared knowledge and support. Many others are facing the same challenges and have valuable insight to offer through those organizations and associations. Parallel and regulatory agencies can also be powerful collaborators. Peer agencies often provide the most practical solutions, and oversight bodies can help clarify expectations and best practices. But when all else fails, return to the record itself and the people it serves. A RIM program exists to support records and their users. Sometimes the clearest path forward starts there. No matter the case, don't hesitate to reach out when you need help. You are not alone, nothing stops you, and even we are going through the same hurdles. Ultimately, records management done well is a reflection of an organization that is doing well. It shows that an agency operates legally, efficiently, and responsibly. It demonstrates that internal processes are organized, adaptable, accessible when needed, and protected when required. That is the purpose and value of a RIM program. The blueprint we discussed is your guide to building that, a strong, sustainable program supported by clear principles, practical steps, and ongoing assistance. While implementation rests with the records officer, the ultimate goal remains the same for all of us: to ensure records are created, maintained, protected, retained, and disposed of appropriately in support of compliance, efficiency, transparency, and accountability. Records are the backbone of government. A strong backbone requires a strong program, and a strong program is how we keep Arizona relevant in the grand scheme of American governance and records. Thank you for viewing this presentation, and if you have any questions, please ask us on our website or send us an email at records@azlibrary.gov or for transfers at archives@azlibrary.gov. This presentation also accompanies other presentation materials that may clarify certain areas contextually.